So, a couple of big things that I want to talk about briefly here, and then I would like to get into them much more extensively in the next few days on my channel. First of all, Rammstein's lawyers have come out with some big interviews in Germany, and it is unusual to see lawyers behaving this aggressively and giving these kinds of extensive interviews. And the things that they are saying in these interviews are just dead on target, ballsy, and very, very astute, and it's really nice to see that. And so I want to talk about these articles, these interviews, and I posted some of them on a bit about them on my Instagram and my Twitter. But definitely very, very, very aggressive, very much trying to get on the offense in a way. And of course, as you know, Lindemann's lawyers have been going after various entities in the press, like Der Spiegel, for reporting fake news. But his two main attorneys, Simon Bergman and Christian Schertz, if I'm pronouncing their names correctly, of Schertz Bergman, have been doing a really amazing job in the press, and I think a great job not only of addressing the particularities of the allegations against Lindemann and Rammstein, but also addressing this larger Me Too phenomenon, which I think has caught a lot of people flat-footed because it is still such a new phenomenon. And I'm not just talking about Me Too, but I'm talking about the idea of modern cancel culture and the modern witch hunts that we see taking place all around us, and people's reputations, their careers are being endangered on the basis of heavily incentivized declarations that often disturbed or opportunistic people are making to the media, or that the media themselves are creating these stories, often by making inferences and implications that are not warranted, by taking allegations at face value, even when they're coming from obviously non-credible sources, and by taking things that are actually innocuous and twisting them around into dynamics that seem sinister or can be presented as sinister. And so I thought that, for instance, today's interview, or the interview that came out today with Bergman, where he's talking about Rammstein and he's talking about Till Lindemann, and he's really breaking down what's going on in the media and how the media actually, these media entities like Der Spiegel and Rolling Stone and a lot of the others, they make very, very sort of cold-blooded calculations when they go after people about whether or not those people are actually going to have the means to call them to task, or whether they're going to get away with it. And so Bergman was saying that there's this calculation that they do. They look at people and they say, okay, we put this out here. It's not substantiated. Is this person, do they have the financial means to come after us in court? And how difficult is it going to be for them to prove what they need to prove, especially here in the United States, where the standards are so high, it's almost impossible to sue entities, journalistic entities, for libel or defamation. And so these journalistic entities, these newspapers, what have you, online sources like Der Spiegel, like Rolling Stone, they have really nothing to fear up until now. They have really nothing to fear in putting out allegations that are false or unsubstantiated. And they have nothing to fear in basically abandoning time-honored journalistic standards. And so it was really interesting to read this interview that came out today. There was one with Christian Schertz, another of Lindemann's lawyers, that I believe came out several days ago. And I'm going to be covering these more, and I actually want to go into them and read them to you, into these articles and these interviews. And so I will do that very soon. But I also wanted to say my sister is coming into town. Things are going to be busy today. I just got back from Washington, D.C. It was a really amazing trip. I went to see Pop Culture Crisis and go on their live stream and spread the word about Me Too hoaxes and Marilyn Manson and Rammstein and Johnny Depp and all of that. And so I did, and and you can find that online, Pop Culture Crisis, the live stream. And I'll be talking more about that as well. And I'm going to talk on my Patreon about more about my trip this weekend, especially going on that show was really interesting. So anyhow, but I wanted to talk about Oppenheimer just a bit because I watched Oppenheimer last night. I went to the theater, went to see it, and it was a great movie. But beyond talking about the fact that it was a great movie, because a lot of people are going to acknowledge that, I have to tell you that I thought about almost the whole time I was watching it, for a good part of the time I was watching Oppenheimer, I was thinking about how much it resonated with me in terms of these Me Too hoaxes, Marilyn Manson case situation, and the Rammstein Till Lindemann situation, and others. Because if you didn't know this, and I'm not going to give away spoilers, but if you didn't know this, most of the movie Oppenheimer is less concerned with the bomb and much more concerned with a kind of a witch hunt that Oppenheimer was targeted by after he built the bomb and after that World War II had passed. And he was targeted by a witch hunt, and it really ruined him and his reputation in a lot of ways. And so a lot of the film actually takes place in this one small room, this one tiny room that feels so crowded and cramped. And I think that Nolan did that on purpose because he wanted us to feel the claustrophobia of what Oppenheimer felt as he was going through this witch hunt and seeing his reputation destroyed and his family targeted and his legacy tarnished, and was even accused of things like treason at times. I think that the filmmaker Nolan wants you to feel the claustrophobia of that. And the men who were going after him, just attacking him ruthlessly, twisting everything that he said, twisting, taking some of his moments actually of bravery and conviction from the past or of friendship and making them sinister. I mean, you just have to see the movie, and I don't want to give away spoilers, but the thing is that in the face of that, Oppenheimer, as played by Cillian Murphy, very, very passive, very, very passive, sad man. His wife kept saying to him, "Why don't you fight? Why don't you fight? Why did you shake the hand of the guy that just talked shit about you?" And Oppenheimer is just this very sort of sad, passive martyr. And I just was thinking about how much these Me Too, how much all of this reminded me of these Me Too witch hunts today. And not just Me Too, but cancel culture, and of what we have been seeing for several years now with the lowering of and complete abdication of journalistic standards by so many journalistic entities, magazines like Der Spiegel and like Rolling Stone and so many others, New York Times, right? And also of the way that these kinds of witch hunts, they just take these men, these accused, and of course it's not always men, sometimes increasingly it's women as well, and they just beat them down. They just beat them down. And there's a sense you get with Oppenheimer in the film that he's being passive in the face of this, not out of fear, but out of this kind of sense of like depressive futility, that he knows that he is in this Kafka-esque situation, or he's stuck in this machine, and once the wheels have started turning, one just has to one just has to accept it in a way and let it happen. And so my point is that it really there were so many aspects of it that really actually did not resonate with me in terms of the obvious ways, but in terms of thinking about cancel culture and Me Too and the types of witch hunts that we have seen taking place with Marilyn Manson, with Till Lindemann, Rammstein, with Johnny Depp, and to Johnny Depp to a lesser degree, because I know it was just one woman orchestrating a smaller hoax of her friends or what have you, but the media colluding. And that's the thing that Oppenheimer didn't have to face as much, although it was humiliating. I know when people around him found out that he had lost his security clearance, and I know that it was humiliating for him to go through this, and when it was eventually publicized. But the media now have become the prime antagonist in these situations. It's no longer some McCarthy-esque hearing or some kind of internal bureaucratic oversight group as we see in Oppenheimer or a congressional inquiry. Now it's the media. And you could argue that the media even supplant the actual accusers for manipulation and vindictiveness in some ways, at least in terms of the fact that the media should be unbiased. They shouldn't have a dog in these fights, and yet they so clearly do. And far more now than ever, perhaps more interested in sensation and scandal and a big story than in attempting to get to the truth or provide a fair approximation of facts and events. And Simon Bergman, Till Lindemann's attorney, in this latest interview, that's one of the things that he said right out of the gate in this interview. He said, oh, and I wish I could remember now, I have to find it on my phone, but he used this term basically saying that this has become, these kinds of scenarios, these Me Too cases, these media cancellations have become this kind of, like, he calls it a drainful sensationic style. Now that's the translation, but a drainful, sensationic style. Interesting, very interesting. So I'm going to be talking about all of that more. Oppenheimer, Rammstein's lawyers, their interviews, what they said, the Marilyn Manson situation, and more. So subscribe, check me out. Your sport's appreciated. My links are below, and I'm going to have some interesting stuff out for my Patreon peeps very soon, today, tonight as well. All right, bye everybody.